Hello and welcome to the class. My name is Daniel, and today we're going to be looking at part one of the listening section. Now, if you have any questions after the class, you can go to the top of the screen and click on the chat icon to send us a message. This is the first of two classes and will last just over 20 minutes. First, we're going to talk about spelling and numbers, and then we're going to look at form completion. So by the end of the session, you'll be more aware of how to answer questions in the listening section one. Now, during the class, there'll be questions for you to answer. These will appear below the video, and I'll tell you when you need to answer them, and I'll give you 10 to 15 seconds for each. So let's start by looking at something more general, which is the use of time in the listening test. Obviously, you have to use your time as well as you possibly can. Now, the first point is that most sections in the listening are divided into two parts, and they have different question types in each part. Okay, so maybe you've got like form completion first, and then you'll have a different type of question after that. So you have 20 to 30 seconds before each part, and this is so you can read the questions, have a little look at any gaps or any words, and try and think about synonyms, that kind of thing. The speaker in the recording will tell you when to look at the questions and which questions to look at. So you'll hear something like, you now have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. And you know at that moment you can look down and start to think about questions 11 to 14. It's important to use the time to focus on questions you will hear, not ones you've heard. This is really key. Lots of students miss questions because they're thinking about the questions from before. And that's just a waste of time. Once the question is gone, forget about it. Start focusing on the next question. So let's look at listening part one and what it includes. Well, it's usually a conversation between two people. And it's often like an everyday situation. Sometimes we call it a transactional situation. It could be booking a room in a hotel, or it could be maybe booking a table, or it could be requesting information from a sports center or something like that. So it's something that is done every day. So it should be familiar to most people. It requires a lot of spelling and numbers in it. So this is one part where you really need to be familiar with that. So it could have like people's names, their ages, their addresses, that kind of thing. So you need to be familiar with how to spell things, the letters of the alphabet, and also numbers from like 1 to 100. And the most common type of question in section one is form completion. This is where you'll get a form and you have to fill in, for example, someone's name, someone's address, someone's date of birth, that kind of thing. And we're going to look at this more in the coming slides. So we're going to start with spelling and numbers. So why are spelling and numbers important? Well, this is kind of key. If you make a spelling mistake, you won't get the mark. You'll lose the mark if you spell something incorrectly. So it's really important to be able to spell things correctly in the IELTS. It's often a form completion task. So there's lots of spelling of names, addresses, phone numbers in section one. There's 10 marks in section one. So it's the part of the exam where you have the best opportunity to get some easy marks, but it comes down to spelling, names, addresses, that kind of thing. So we need to be very familiar with this. So some tips that I could give you is become familiar with the alphabet. Okay, A, B, C, D, E, that kind of thing, and the different sounds of each one. If you get confused between two different sounds, it's important that you learn them so you're not being confused by them anymore. And also numbers between 1 and 100. Probably you won't get any numbers in section 1 over 100. It'll be between 1 and 100. Maybe like someone's address might be like 40 something, that kind of thing. Learn the difference between similar sounds like I and E. If in your language I sounds like one sound and E sounds like a different one, and you confuse them in English, try to make an effort to know what the difference is between, for example, I and E. Well, we're going to have a bit of practice here. So here in the purple, we have one set of sounds. And here we have another. Now, I'm going to read one of these, and I'd like you to look at question 1 below the video, and I want you to choose the correct sound that you hear. So, for number 1, B. B. Number 2, N. N. Number 3, J. J. Number 4, B. B. Number 5, S. S. Number 6, U. U. Number 7, E. E. And number 8, 14. 14. Okay, so hopefully you chose the following ones. The first one, I said B. That's different to V. They sound very similar, but this has is a B. Okay. The second one, I said N instead of M, which is this. N, which is this. So I said N. For the third one, I said J, and this one is G. So again, they're quite similar. Then I said B again instead of P. For the fifth one, I said S, and I didn't say X. The next one, I said U and not W. And for the next one, I said E and not I. And for the final one, I said 14, not 40. 14, you can hear the longer sound at the end compared to 40. Now, these are often commonly mixed up by students. So it's important that if, for example, number 1 was easy for you, no problem. But if number 3 was difficult, maybe you need to go and practice that a little bit more. So let's have a look now at a name. I'm going to spell a name to you, and I want you to look at question 2 below the video, and I want you to type the correct name. So J-A-M-E-S. That's the name. One more time. J-A-M-E-S. So hopefully there you wrote the name James. Again, let's just look. J-A-M-E-S. That's the name James. Now look at question 3, and I'm going to say a surname. I'm going to spell a surname for you. And again, I'd like you to type the correct answer. So V, I, X, E, N. One more time. V, I, X, E, N. Hopefully you wrote out the name Vixen. So it's more common that someone would say, my name is James Vixen. And you spell Vixen V-I-X-E-N. Now I'm going to read you one address. And I'd like you to again look at question 4 and type the correct answer. So the address is 15 Bleak Drive. And that's spelled B-L-E-E-K. That's 15 Bleak Drive. That's B-L-E-E-K. So hopefully you wrote 15 Bleak Drive. Again, I said B-L-E-E-K. Now, if that was easy for you, fantastic. But if it was difficult, maybe you need to go and practice the alphabet a little bit more, become more familiar with it, or become more familiar between like 14, 40, 15, 50, those kinds of numbers. It will really help in the listening task 1. Let's now move on to another thing that's very common, which is phone numbers. So we're going to look at 3 different ways of saying phone numbers. And what I want you to do is look at question 5 and say, how do you think people in the UK say these phone numbers? The first option is 077 924 753 62. Or do they say 07792 475 362? Or do they say 07792475362? So I want you to look at those and choose the correct option. Right. Well, the first one, 077 924 753 62, sometimes people would use that one. So that one's okay sometimes, but it's not the most common way of doing it. The most common way of doing it is this one. It would be 07792 475 362. That's generally how most people will tell you their phone numbers if they're from the UK. So knowing that can be quite useful. That's how we group things together. Number 3, no one ever uses this way of doing it. 07792475362. 75362. It doesn't really work. So we wouldn't use that. 1 and 2, but 2 is the most common. So let's have a look at some tips for remembering phone numbers and understanding them. Well, the first one is that the number, this number here, can be pronounced O. Like here, I said 07792. Or it could be pronounced 0, as in 07792. Both of those are fine. Another thing to remember is that 2 of the same numbers together are usually said as double something. So you could say this 07792, or you could say 07792. So one of those ways are both fine. 07792 or 07792 are both possible. And then what happens in a conversation is that if I tell you my phone number, usually you will repeat the phone number back to me to check that you understood it. So if I said, oh, my phone number is 07792 475 362, then you could say back to me, 07792 475 462, and then I can correct you if you made a mistake. So I can go, no, it's 362, not 462. So this is very common, and in the listening task, you will hear that sometimes. So if you miss the phone number the first time when you're listening, remember you might get another chance to hear it again when the other person repeats it back. So now let's move on to the most common type of question that you get in the IELTS section 1 of the listening, and that is form completion. Well, we're going to first focus on how to complete a form. Completing a form is a gap fill exercise. What I mean by that is there are spaces, missing words or missing numbers or missing names, and you have to put something in that space. It's really important that when you get the form, the first thing you do is to highlight any keywords. By keywords, we mean words that will help you to find your way when you're listening to the task. So that could be something like someone's name, it could be a surname, or it could be an address. These are all keywords in a form in section 1. After you've highlighted the keywords in the form, you're going to try to guess what is missing. So if it said the person's first name and then there was a gap, you can imagine in that gap there is going to be their second name or their surname. So the second thing you need to do is predict what you will need to put in the gap. So again, it could be a name, it could be a number. If it's an address and it just has one part at the beginning missing, probably it will be a number in that situation. So you first look at the keywords and then you try to guess or predict what needs to go in the gaps. So let's just look at the difference between a form and a gap fill. They're not really different in the content, but just how they look is different. So we can see here, this would be a form, and it has the person's name here, and it says personal information. It's organized in 2 boxes. Here it's got their mobile and a column, and then here it has the number, which is the question. And so the missing information here, this is going to be a phone number. This is what a form looks like. Compared to a gap fill, would look like this. You just have the question number, and it would be a full sentence, and it would have a missing gap. So it says Jason's mobile phone number is. It still has all the same information. It has Jason, mobile phone number, and then it's got a verb here. It's got is, and here we'd need the phone number like we do here. So it's basically the same, but it's just organized a little bit differently. You'll see in forms, you don't need verbs. But in a gap fill, in a sentence, you need verbs, that kind of thing, to connect the ideas together. So they're similar, but a little bit different in their layout. So let's have a bit of practice with what we were just talking about there. Well, first, we said we need to look for the key words. And here we have a form. And we need to think, what are the key words here? Well, okay, we've got stuff like first name, last name, address. So it's clear what we're going to need in those places. So the first name, we've got Jason. Okay, so probably there's nothing here. The last name, we've got just a question. So we're going to need a last name there or a surname there. Then here we've got address, we've got the number, which shows it's the next question. And we've got Crows Avenue, Swindon. Now, this is a town or a city. This is a place in the town or city. And probably here, we will need a number to go there because it's probably someone's house number. Then a postcode is like an area code. So it's going to be some letters and numbers together that we're missing here. Then it says home phone. It's got not applicable, so there's no home phone number here, but it's got mobile, so we're going to need a mobile phone number here. And we're going to remember what we spoke about with phone numbers from before. And then here we've got the word email, and we've got the email address here, the ending of it. So we're going to need the beginning of it. Now, usually people's emails are something connected to their names. So you can look at the name and maybe think, is the name going to be in there somewhere? That's usually how people do it. So what I'm going to do is I'll ask you to look at questions 6 to 10 below the video. I'm going to play the listening, and I'd like you to try to complete those questions as you listen.
Hello, Chanctonbury Leisure Centre. How may I help you?
Oh, hello. My name's Jason Height. I've just been looking online at your programmes, and I'd really like to apply for a membership.
Okay, Jason, that's no problem. Let's start by taking a few details about you, if that's okay.
Okay.
So your name was Jason...
Height.
Is that H-E-I...
No, sorry. It's a strange spelling. It's actually H-A-I-D-T.
Okay, great. And could I take your house number and postcode?
Yeah, sure. It's 47, and the postcode is SW139LB.
Is that V for Victor?
No, sorry. B for banana.
Okay. So SW139LB.
That's right.
And is that Crows Avenue in Swindon?
That's the one.
Okay, great. And if I could just have your contact number.
Sure. I don't have a landline, but my mobile is 07676 254 143.
Let me just confirm that. 07676 254 413.
No, those last three numbers are 143.
Okay, so 07676 254 143.
Right.
And finally, I just need an email address.
Yes. So it's J and then my surname, Height, @gmail.com.
Right, jheight@gmail.com.
Perfect.
And in the future, would you rather we contacted you via phone or email?
I think phone. No, actually, email is probably better, to be honest. I sometimes don't answer my phone.
Okay, so in the IELTS exam, you just hear the listening one time as well. That's important to remember. Well, let's have a look at these and see how many of them you've got correct. So we're going to start with the first one. So his name was Jason, as we saw here, and his surname was Height. Height. It was pronounced Height, but it had a strange spelling, as he said. So it was H-A-I-D-T, which was Height. His address was 47 Crows Avenue in Swindon, and the postcode was SW139LB, not V. She made a mistake first, and then he corrected her in the listening. The mobile number was 07676 254 143, and you'll have noticed how at first she said 413, but then corrected it again by checking, and he gave her the correct answer. So then the email address, as we said, it was probably something to do with someone's name. So it was actually J for Jason, J, and Height as his surname, jheight@gmail.com. So hopefully you got all of those correct. If not, maybe it's a good idea to go and practice the alphabet, practice and become more familiar with numbers, because in this part of the listening, it can really, really help. Remember, if you have a question for us, you can go to the top of the screen and click on the chat icon to send us a message. Now, remember to take class 2 of 2 and to complete the practice activities online. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again.